The teacup hit the marble floor before she realized she'd dropped it. Porcelain shattered. Silence followed. And in that silence, the billionaire's son stared at her. One with wide-eyed shock, the other with something like fear, as the story she'd just told hung between them like forbidden smoke. "You mean Mama used to clean houses?" the younger twin whispered. Ruth froze. Her throat tightened. She hadn't meant for the words to slip out. Not like that, not here, not in this gilded cage where truth was treated like treason. Behind them, the library doors creaked open. Footsteps, heavy, controlled. Marcus Sterling, the man whose name built half the city, stood in the doorway, his blue suit gleaming against the golden light. His gaze fell to the broken cup, then to her trembling hands. "What?" he asked quietly. "Did you just tell my sons?" The boys turned toward their father, confused, innocent. "She said Mama wasn't rich before she met you. She said courage isn't about money. It's about truth." "Enough." His voice cut through the air like glass. And just like that, Ruth's job, her safety, the fragile connection she'd built, all of it began to crumble. But what Marcus didn't know, and she not yet, was that the forbidden story she told would soon be the very one to save his family. Welcome to Cardinal Stories, my friends. Here we tell heartwarming and inspiring stories that teach lessons about love, redemption, and the power of kindness. If you love stories like this, kindly subscribe to this channel, like, and share this video. Let's dive in. The mansion looked like it had been carved out of silence itself. White marble, spotless glass, and echoes that never dared to linger too long. Inside, everything gleamed, except the people who lived there. Ruth adjusted the stiff white collar of her uniform as she stepped into the grand hallway there for the first time. Her shoes clicked against the marble, one small sound against a world that didn't want her to make any. She'd worked in many homes, but nothing like this. This one felt like walking into a museum of grief. At the end of the hallway stood a portrait, a woman in a flowing silver gown, smiling down at a pair of infant boys in her arms. Mrs. Evelyn Sterling, deceased, gone 5 years now. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're the new nanny?" It was Henry, the butler, his posture upright but his eyes tired. "Mr. Sterling prefers structure. The twins have lessons from 8 to 4, piano at 5, and no bedtime stories." Ruth frowned. "No stories?" "Stories remind them of their mother," he said simply. She nodded, understanding too well the ache of forbidden memories. Moments later, she met the twins, Ethan and Eli, mirror images, with curious blue eyes and matching silence. They sat cross-legged on the floor, building identical towers out of wooden blocks. When Ruth knelt beside them, one looked up and whispered, "Are you going to leave like the others?" Ruth smiled gently. "Not if you don't want me to." But the truth was, this house had a way of chasing people out, not with cruelty, but with coldness. That night, when Marcus Sterling returned, the entire mansion shifted. His presence commanded the air. Tall, composed, his grief disguised as control. He gave Ruth a brief nod, barely looking at her. "I expect discipline, Miss Ruth." The last nanny encouraged emotional behavior. Ruth met his gaze. "Children feel, Mr. Sterling. That's not misbehavior." He paused just long enough for her to know she'd said too much, then turned away. When the door closed, Ruth exhaled softly. She looked toward the twins' room where quiet giggles leaked through the door. A tiny rebellion, a flicker of warmth in a frozen home. By the time the night ended, Ruth didn't know she had already broken the first rule of the house. She had smiled in a place where smiles weren't allowed. Days passed. Ruth became a gentle rhythm in the twins' lives, teaching them songs instead of silence, laughter instead of routine. She noticed things, how Ethan hummed when he was nervous, how Eli bit his sleeve when sad. She taught them to name their feelings, even when the house punished emotion. But everything changed one rainy afternoon in the library. The boys had found an old box beneath the piano, filled with faded photographs of their mother. Ruth hadn't meant to pry, but when Ethan held up a picture and asked, "Why is Mama wearing a maid's uniform?" she felt her breath catch. In that moment, she had a choice: lie or tell them the truth. She knelt beside them. "Because before your mama met your father, she worked for a family. She cleaned, cooked, and saved every penny. She was brave. She wanted a better life. The boys listened, eyes wide, the storm outside matching the storm within. "Did Daddy know?" Eli whispered. "Yes, and he loved her for it." But she saw something shift in their eyes, realization, wonder, confusion, and in the reflection of that truth, the mansion's perfection began to crack. Then came the sound, footsteps behind her. Marcus stood in the doorway, unmoving, his expression unreadable, his silence thunderous. He looked at the photo in Ethan's hand, then at Ruth. "Put that away," he said, voice low but sharp. Ethan hesitated. "But she said Mama was brave." "I said put it away." The boys flinched. Ruth instinctively placed a protective hand on their shoulders. "Mr. Sterling," she began carefully, "they deserve to know who she was." His eyes darkened. "That's not your place." And just like that, he walked out, but not before saying the words that would echo through her chest all night. "Don't ever tell my son stories that aren't yours to tell." Ruth didn't know it yet, but that single moment, that forbidden lesson, had already sealed her fate. The next morning, the mansion felt colder. The twins were quiet during breakfast, their usual chatter gone. Marcus didn't speak to Ruth at all. She cleaned the kitchen in silence, every plate and glass feeling heavier than it should. She replayed his words again and again. "Not your place." But when she saw Ethan and Eli sitting by the window, holding the forbidden photograph between them, she knew the truth couldn't be buried again. "Ruth," Ethan whispered, "why did Daddy get angry?" She hesitated. "Because sometimes adults are scared of remembering. Your father loved your mother more than anything, but love can hurt when it reminds you of what you lost." Eli frowned. "But you said courage is about truth." Her heart tightened. "It is." Behind them, the rain began again, soft, rhythmic, cleansing. Ruth picked up a pen and piece of paper and began writing something quietly. A story, not about the Sterlings, but about a woman who dared to tell the truth even when it cost her everything. That night, she slipped the story beneath their pillows. But as fate would have it, Marcus found it before they did. He read the first line. "Once upon a time, a woman told a truth that set her free." And something in him snapped. He walked down the hallway, the paper trembling in his hand, and stopped outside her door. When Ruth opened it, he didn't shout. He didn't even look angry. Only broken. "I told you once," he said quietly, "don't teach them to question their world." Ruth stood her ground. "I'm teaching them to understand it." A long silence hung between them. Thick, electric, dangerous. Then he said the words she'd feared all along. "You're fired." But neither of them realized that the real lesson had just begun. Ruth packed her few belongings in silence. A folded uniform, a worn Bible, a faded photograph of her own late mother. She didn't cry. Not yet. Some losses were too familiar to weep for immediately. Henry, the butler, stood by the door. His voice was low, almost apologetic. "Mr. Sterling said the driver will take you into town by morning." Ruth nodded. "And the boys?" "They're not taking it well." That evening, she heard soft footsteps outside her door, two small silhouettes lingering in the corridor. "Ruth," Ethan whispered, "can we come in?" She hesitated, then opened the door. They rushed in and hugged her waist. "You can't leave," Eli said, his voice trembling. "We'll tell Daddy to stop being mean." Ruth smiled through the ache. "He's not mean, sweetheart. He's just hurting. But we're hurting too." The simplicity of that truth nearly broke her. A sharp knock interrupted them. Marcus stood at the doorway, his jaw tight, eyes shadowed. "Boys, to your rooms." Ethan turned, defiant. "No, we want Ruth to stay." Marcus took a breath, his control fraying. "Now." When the boys finally left, silence filled the space again. Ruth folded her hands before her. "If you think firing me will erase what they know, you're wrong." He looked at her then, really looked. "You don't understand. You've opened a door I've kept shut for a reason." Ruth took a cautious step forward. "Maybe that door needs to be opened, Marcus." He flinched at the sound of his name from her lips. "Good night, Miss Ruth," he said quietly, and turned away. But as the night deepened, thunder rolled outside and the power went out. The house, stripped of its perfection, felt human for the first time. In the darkness, Ruth heard a scream, one of the twins. Without thinking, she ran upstairs. Lightning flickered through the hall as she burst into the room. Eli sat upright, shaking, the storm outside mirroring the one within. "It's Mama," he whispered. "I saw her in my dream. She was crying." Ruth held him close. "She's not crying, sweetheart. She's proud of you." A shadow moved in the doorway. Marcus, watching silently. He saw the way Ruth held his son, calm, steady, the way Evelyn once did. For the first time in years, he didn't step in. He just stood there and let someone else love his child. The storm passed, but something inside Marcus didn't. The next morning, Ruth was still there, not gone as ordered. The roads were flooded and the driver couldn't leave. Fate's cruel kindness. Over breakfast, the twins sat close to Ruth, whispering secrets and stolen giggles. Marcus watched from a distance, his thoughts louder than their laughter. Later that day, he found himself in the study, staring at Evelyn's portrait. For years, he'd protected her memory by controlling it, sanitizing it. But now Ruth's words echoed, "Maybe that door needs to be opened." That night, he found Ruth in the kitchen drying dishes. "You said you teach them to understand the world," he said quietly. "Tell me, Miss Ruth, do you understand mine?" She looked up. "Try me." He poured a drink but didn't touch it. "Evelyn wasn't just my wife, she was my scandal. My father never forgave me for marrying her, said I'd tarnish the family name by marrying beneath me." Ruth said nothing, only listened. "I thought keeping her past hidden would protect the boys from that same judgment. Maybe I was wrong." Ruth wiped her hands on her apron, her voice soft but steady. "Children don't need protection from truth, Mr. Sterling. They need protection from shame." His gaze lingered on her, this woman who spoke without fear. He envied it. "Did you ever love someone," he asked, "so much that losing them made you afraid to feel anything again?" Her silence was answer enough. After a long pause, she said, "My mother worked as a cleaner her whole life. She used to tell me, 'Ruth, courage isn't born in comfort. It's born in pain.' Maybe that's what your wife tried to teach you." For a moment, neither moved. The air between them shifted, grief and admiration, recognition and restraint. But then a small voice from the hall broke it. "Daddy!" It was Ethan holding the story Ruth had written. "Can you read this with us tonight?" Marcus hesitated, the paper trembling in his hand again. Then he nodded slowly. "All right," he said, "let's read." And for the first time in 5 years, the house heard laughter during bedtime. The days that followed were only different, softer. Marcus no longer avoided the twins' questions. He joined them for breakfast. He let them play piano again, songs Evelyn once loved. Ruth's presence had begun to thaw the mansion's quiet grief. But beneath it all, Ruth knew her job was still temporary. She'd been fired, after all. Only weather had delayed her leaving. One afternoon, she sat outside with the boys as they painted on the patio. Eli's brush slipped, splattering color across her apron. "Sorry," he laughed. Ruth laughed, too, a sound that made Marcus, watching from the balcony, pause mid-step. He found himself smiling, a real, unguarded smile. Then guilt followed, swift and sharp. That night, he found her again in the library. She was closing the curtains when he spoke softly behind her. "You've changed this house, Miss Ruth." She turned. "The house was never the problem, Mr. Sterling." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "You're not like the others." Ruth tilted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "Neither was your wife." For a heartbeat, the room went still. He looked away, emotion tightening his jaw. "You talk about her like you knew her." Ruth shook her head. "No, but I understand her. Women like us, we spend our lives cleaning up other people's messes while carrying our own quietly." Marcus's eyes softened. "And yet, babe, you're still standing." "So are you," she said. A silence stretched, heavy, meaningful, dangerous. Then Ethan's voice echoed from upstairs, breaking it. "Ruth, Daddy, come quick." They rushed to the twins' room. The boys stood near the fireplace, holding a small box. Inside were Evelyn's old letters, addressed to Marcus. but never opened. Ruth looked at him. Maybe it's time, she whispered. Marcus swallowed hard. Maybe it is. As he reached for the first envelope, his hands trembled. Ruth stayed beside him, quiet, steady, like the truth itself. And as he opened that first letter, something deep inside him began to break, or maybe finally begin to heal. The unopened letters sat between them like fragile ghosts. Marcus stared at the first one, his hands trembling. The seal had yellowed with time, grief preserved in paper. He finally broke it open. Evelyn's handwriting was graceful but hurried. If you're reading this, it means I didn't find the courage to tell you everything. I never wanted you to be ashamed of where I came from, or of the woman I used to be. Marcus's chest tightened. He read the next line silently, his eyes darkening. Sometimes I wonder if you still see me, or just the version of me the world can't accept. He stopped reading. The room felt smaller. Ruth waited, her silence respectful but tense. Why didn't she give these to me? He muttered, almost to himself. Maybe she tried, Ruth said softly. Maybe you weren't ready to listen. His head snapped up. Don't you dare imply. I'm not implying, Ruth interrupted. Her tone turned to calm. I'm saying grief blinds us. You've lived 5 years protecting your pride instead of your children's hearts. Her words struck harder than she intended. Marcus rose from his chair, his voice low but shaking. You think you understand my pain because you have known struggle? You don't know what it means to lose everything you built. Ruth stepped closer. No, Mr. Sterling. I know exactly what that means, because I've lost everything too, again and again, but I never punished love for it. A long, dangerous silence. He looked at her then, truly looked, and for the first time, the wall cracked. But before either could speak again, Ethan's small voice came from the doorway. Daddy, are you fighting because of us? Marcus froze. Ruth turned. The twins stood there, tears brimming. Eli held out the letter. Mama wrote to you, not to be hidden. Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Ruth knelt beside the boys. It's all right, sweethearts. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to be brave. Her words were kind, but Marcus heard the deeper truth in them, a mirror he couldn't look away from. Without a word, he turned and left the room. As the sound of his footsteps faded, Ruth's heart sank. She had pushed him too far, and for the first time since she arrived, she wasn't sure if the truth could still save them, or if it had just destroyed everything. The house was silent again, that heavy, watchful silence that came before change or collapse. Ruth sat on the edge of her small bed, her packed bag by the door. This time, there would be no storm to delay her departure. She picked up the letter Marcus had left behind on the kitchen counter. The one half open, its ink smeared by a single teardrop. She hesitated, then read the last lines. If I could ask one thing of you, Marcus, it would be this. Don't let our boys grow up afraid of truth. Don't make them wear the armor that crushed you. Ruth closed her eyes. That letter wasn't meant for her, but somehow it felt like it was. Upstairs, Marcus stood alone in his study. The city lights glimmered beyond the window, reflections flickering against glass. He looked at the empty hallways, all the years of silence, control, fear. He saw what Ruth had seen from the very beginning. 2 children craving warmth in a house built on pride. He thought of Evelyn's words and Ruth's courage. Henry entered quietly. Sir, the driver's here. Miss Ruth is ready to leave. Marcus turned, his face unreadable. Thank you, Henry. That'll be all. But as Henry left, Marcus didn't move. His hands shook as he stared at the photograph on his desk. Evelyn holding the twins, her smile alive. He whispered, You'd hate what I've become, wouldn't you? Outside, Ruth stood by the car, the twins clinging to her. Their eyes were red from crying. Eli looked up. Please don't go. Ruth knelt, brushing a curl from his forehead. Sometimes we have to leave to help people see. Ethan frowned. See what? She smiled sadly. The truth they have been running from. The car door opened. She took one last look at the mansion, the marble walls, the memories, the ghosts. Then a voice called out from behind, deep, unsteady. Ruth! Marcus stood in the doorway, drenched in golden sunrise, breathing hard like he'd been running. The twins turned, eyes lighting up. He walked toward them, each step shedding years of silence. Wait, he said, voice breaking. Don't go yet. Please. Ruth froze, the twins gasped. Marcus stopped in front of her, his chest rising with every breath. You were right, he said quietly. All this time I thought I was protecting them. But I was just protecting myself. Her eyes softened. It takes courage to admit that. He nodded slowly. Then maybe you could teach me too. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air was thick with everything unsaid. Then, from the second-floor window, Evelyn's portrait caught the morning light. And for the first time, the house looked alive again. Weeks later, laughter returned to the Sterling mansion. The twins ran through the garden barefoot, Ruth chasing them with mock sternness. Marcus watched from the terrace, a faint smile touching his lips, the kind that spoke of quiet redemption. He'd reopened Evelyn's foundation, this time in her real name, not her husband's, and created a scholarship for underprivileged women. Ruth had helped him design it. In the evenings, they sat together, reading Evelyn's letters aloud to the boys. Each letter carried a lesson, not of wealth, but of heart. Ruth had become more than a nanny now. She was part of the home Evelyn had always dreamed of building. One evening, Marcus approached her by the piano. I read the story you left for the boys, he said, the one about the woman who told the truth. Ruth looked up. Did you like it? He nodded. It reminded me of someone I used to know, and someone I hope to know better. Their eyes met, not with the spark of romance, but with the warmth of respect, the quiet pulse of something real and earned. Ethan's voice broke the moment. Daddy, play the song Mama loved. Marcus smiled and sat by the piano. Ruth stood behind the twins, her hands resting gently on their shoulders as he began to play. The notes filled the room, not polished, not perfect, but honest. As the melody rose, Ruth whispered softly, Courage isn't in power or silence. It's in truth. Marcus glanced up at her, and for once, didn't look away. When the final note faded, the house didn't echo with emptiness anymore. It hummed with life, with forgiveness, with family. And in that moment, Evelyn's words and Ruth's forbidden lesson finally became one truth that would never again be silenced. The end.